For the past few centuries, the Kutiyans had been living on the frontiers of the Quelca Empire, conducting unorganized and infrequent raids. In 203 BCE, Chief Cosmla, with his sergeant Mijer, had made his fortune in a particularly lucrative raid in the villages around Tletl, a wealthy gold mining town. The local legion had been relocated to deal with Governor Rolzo, who had raised his legions against the emperor in a bold bid for power. Seeing the riches from the raid, several hundred men joined Cosmla's host for an ambitious attack on the city while it was celebrating New Year. As Cosmla made his plan, a comet flew over the settlement of the war camp. Was this a sign? Cosmla's army made its way towards Calens Bridge, the formal border into the province. The crossing was supposed to be uncontested, but the legion was already on the other side. Sergeant Mijer had defected for a large sum of gold, with the hopes of killing Cosmla on the battlefield and ruling as a powerful client king of the empire. He was accompanied by the young Emperor Sitali, who had recaptured the city from Rolso just days before and proven his worth as leader. Now, he was set on restoring the glory of the fragile empire. Cosmla elevated a young ex-mercenary, Boldészar, as his sergeant. He had fought for the empire only years before in the Garsic Wars and knew their tactics well. The two warlords observed as imperial troops began to construct a fort on their side of the river. They knew that the longer they waited, the harder it would be to dislodge them. Retreat was no longer an option. This was not a raid. The Second Kutyan War had just begun. Although the river was only knee-deep, Cosmla decided not to cross until nightfall, so that the heavily armed infantry on the other side wouldn't cut them down before they arrived. There was a fierce standoff during the day, with some light arrow fire being exchanged, but little actual progress. They decided to make the crossing near a nearby forest, so that they would have decent cover. The crossing was simple enough, but the troops had been seen, and the camp had already sounded the alarm. Without the element of surprise, the situation looked grim for the Kutiyans. The trumpets sounded, and imperial infantry began to approach from the north. Mijer's elite cavalry guards smashed into the left of the Kutyan forces, attempting to encircle Boldészar's banner and press the enemy against the river for a quick victory. Boldészar began to fall behind the line, retreating and re-engaging. The infantry approached, with the signature bash of the imperial shields, as well as a huge numerical advantage terrifying the Kutiyans who, for the most part, had no or little experience fighting the Calcans. Emperor Sitali inspired his men, as the Kutiyans began to break under the pressure of the imperial infantry. Mijer's engagement with Boldészar looked dire for the Kutiyans, with constant retreats rather than actual combat, despite Boldészar's banner being perhaps the most elite troops on the battlefield. However, once Mijer had been taken far from the bulk of combat, he soon realized his fatal error. Boldészar gave an order, and his troops threw their spears at the enemy, taking them totally by surprise. They then unsheathed their swords and engaged fully. The supposed retreat had been a ruse. Mijer was impaled through the neck by one of these spears, and many other units fell in the same fashion. Seeing so many of their comrades die in one attack, and the brutally aggressive charge of Boldészar's men, the cavalry began to flee in terror. The main Kutyan force had not been so lucky. They had suffered huge casualties, and Cosmla had been gravely wounded. He was fighting with an arrow lodged deep in his gut. With no real way to retreat, being backed up against the river and the forest, they knew defeat meant death or enslavement. Many were trying to cross the river, but most drowned in the process. Horns sounded as Boldészar's men crashed into the back of the imperial forces on the left flank. Hundreds of imperial troops were cut up in the confusion, and rumours broke out that the emperor had been killed. Imperial troops tried to flee, as they were crushed against the force of the Kutiyans. Within 2 hours, most of the imperial soldiers had been killed, the rest managing to flee. Now the emperor truly was dead. Despite the death of Cosmla a few hours after the battle, the troops were in high spirits, and named Boldészar the Birokos, Empire Killer. Boldészar's men pressed their victory, gathering forces outside Tletl. According to legend, the Birokos held the emperor's decapitated head up high, and the city gates opened in terror. The town was sacked, although special treatment was given to the shield slaves. Boldészar had come across these oppressed people as a mercenary, and he had great sympathy for their cause. He armoured them in the armoury and absorbed them into his army. He had great plans ahead.